Okay, so the Chofetz Chaim, yeah, as I said, like today, Haredi culture is dominated by Gedolim. There's the people who everyone is meant to see as the good lador, the big person of the generation. This was Rav Steinman, Rav Shach, Rav Chaim Kanievsky. Chofetz Chaim, I think you can say, was the first Gudel Hador. Somebody who's accepted and seen as great by pretty much all the whole spectrum of Haredi Jewry, even Hasidim, Litvisher, and so on. Now, Chofetz Chaim, his halachic writings are incredibly influential. He is a great, very clear writer, very clear halachic thinker. I spent hundreds of hours studying his books, and everyone who goes through the traditional Haredi yeshiva system will spend hundreds of hours reading his books. And he's a very, very clear, accessible thinker. And he's also a great... It's not only that he's kind of a great kind of pop halachic writer that's accessible. He's also a very brilliant halachist. Not brilliant in the sense of, he has these brilliant ideas. Very clear, very, in Bia Halacha, for example. So Mishnah Berurah has three parts. There's the main body of the Mishnah Berurah that everyone learns. There's Bia Halacha, where he clarifies kind of his novel thoughts, where he deduces kind of new rulings. And it's quite, it's very, very clear. He's a very rational kind of clear, you read Bialoch and you tend to agree with him. It's like, yeah, that makes a lot of sense. At least I found to be that way. So I think as a halachist, I respect him a lot. Now, as a Musa figure, as a figure of, because he was also seen as, the Saba Kadisha, this holy kind of old saint in his lifetime even, because he was very old. So he was seen as a saintly figure, a paragon of Musar, of Midas Toivas. And, according to accounts, he was a very, very, a very noble and refined person who, had great concern for the people around him and, great acts of charity, a nice person. But his other famous book is the Chofetz Chaim. He's named after that book. And that, I have to say, I find that not great. It's a whole book on gossip, on Shmiras Halushin, on not talking Lushan Hara, and he makes it into this halachic kind of legalistic thing, where instead of just being like, look, be a nice person, don't slag off other people, don't go around gossiping other people, think about others' feelings. He made it into this legalistic system where everything is defined by laws and laws and laws and this scenario, that scenario, which just makes, for me, it ruins it. It makes just being a nice person, it makes that into a whole legalistic system. It shouldn't be. Being a nice person shouldn't be about following a set of laws. It should be about empathy and kindness and thinking of others. But he, being the great halachist, made this area of compassion and kindness into a legalistic system, and I think it ruined it. And a lot of people get lost in the details. A lot of people obsess about reading the Chofetz Chaim and getting all the laws right, and it can get in the way of just being a nice, decent human being. So I think that would drop him for me a tier probably. So if not for that, I would put him in the A tier. I think I'm going to put him in the B tier. Okay, next up we have Yonasan Eibshitz. Now this guy is more myth than person. His legacy is filled with legend. There's just these stories about him on how he just defeated these anti-Semites, or he would have these brilliant retorts to kind of people teasing him and so on. Now he is quite unique amongst traditional rabbis, at least of the last of the Achronim period of the last 500 years, in that he was, besides for being a great scholar, he was also very familiar. Well, I wouldn't say very familiar, but quite familiar. He took an interest in secular knowledge. He took an interest in the sciences of his time, in the rules of grammar and logic, and other things. And he was quite a worldly man. I must confess, I don't know much about his writings, his halachic writings. I know he's quite influential as a commentator on, I think it's, his book is called Chrysia Fleissy. I don't know if that's how you pronounce it, which is a commentation on the laws, if I'm not mistaken, of Kashrus. But I may be wrong, because I haven't really studied Yoredaya, so that's that part of Shulchan Aruch, which he comments on. Does he also have a commentary on Choshen Mishpat? I think he might have a commentary on Choshen Mishpat as well. But anyway, I'm a bit hazy here on the details. But yeah, seen as this brilliant guy, quite worldly, and also quite probably a Sabbatean, quite possibly somebody who has sympathies with Shabbosite Tzvi. So this was the massive, massive controversy in his time, and we'll soon. The next person here on the list is Yakivendin, his great adversary, his great enemy, who tried to expose him as a Sabbatean. Now, for many, I think the traditional Haredi view is that, Yakivendin was wrong in that, and he wasn't a Sabbatean, that Yonasan Eibshitz wasn't a Sabbatean. I think the academic view is I think on the other side. So Gershom Sholem, the great mystical scholar and the great scholar of Sabbateanism, I think he does think that Eibshitz, whether if he was a full-on Sabbatean or had Sabbatean sympathies, but either way, had dodgy views. So Emdin probably had a point there. Anyway, so I would put Eibshitz. I think where would I put? I think I'd put him in the B tier. Quite influential person, legend, myth. But how influential is his writings in the grander scheme of things? I'm not sure. He left the same kind of legacy as other people in the A tier. I don't think so. So I would put him in the B tier. Okay. Next up we have Yakivendin. Yakivendin, as I said, great adversary of Yonasan Eibshitz. Very, very troubled man. Now, actually, one thing that we have about Yakivendin that we don't have about most rabbis of that era and even since is a glimpse into him as a person, as a human being. Most rabbis, we get to know him from their works, from their halachic works, and we don't get a glimpse into their own person because the genre of autobiography or memoir is not really a thing when it comes to rabbis. Yakivendin is a great exception. He wrote his own memoir, which is quite disturbing in places. He writes very, very candidly about his lives and his adventures and his troubles. And actually, it's so disturbing that in Haredi publications, they censor it. So the Haredi community, when they publish this memoir, they censor the bits that they can't fathom. They simply take out bits where he talks about his desires, like I think his sexual desires, his great desire for vengeance on his enemies. These things are not befitting for a great rabbi, And Yakivendin has become, Haredi hagiography, the Haredi kind of historiography, the way people are seen. It's you're either bad or good, right? You're either a saint or if you're a great man, then you can't really be making mistakes or you can't have defects. A tzaddik is a gudel and you can't say anything bad about them. So having a person like Yakivendin, who is a great scholar and brilliant man, and and came to be known as quite a a holy person, but to say that he has defects isn't really acceptable. So they had to kind of cut out these kind of unpleasant things about his life. But for me, that is that's a great asset that he is a human being, and we get a glimpse into a troubled person who is a great scholar, brilliant man, but also has lots of defects, and as I said, quite troubled, and I should say quite a nasty human being. So he is very hateful, he is very vengeful. He goes around his life being very, very troubled and about the people who he hates and wants vengeance on. So I think for that alone, again, I don't think he left his writings aren't super influential. He didn't leave a massive mark on kind of Jewish literature. Quite influential as a historical figure, but also him being a nasty human being doesn't help. But on the other hand, as I said, he is very honest and humble in the way we get a glimpse in and vulnerable in the way we get a glimpse into his life. So I think for that, I think I'd put him. It's between B and C. Where should I put him? I don't know if I want to put him in C just for not being a nice person, but in B kind of for being vulnerable. I think he's going to end up in C. All right, I'm going to pause here and carry on in the next one.